Hello, Esben. My name is James Rosenstein. I'm on the board of One Business World, and it's a real pleasure for me to introduce Mr. Esben Friis-Jensen. He is the co-founder and chief growth officer of Userflow, and he will be focusing on this topic: how to start an SaaS B2B company and successfully bootstrap it to growth with a small team. I really look forward to hearing more about this. I mean, SaaS is such a useful and important topic. So I hand it over to you and look forward to learning.
Thank you, James. It's my pleasure being here, and I'm looking forward to doing this presentation. I'm just gonna share my screen here. So yeah, as James mentioned, we're here to talk about how to start a SaaS or software as a service B2B company and successfully bootstrap it to growth with a small team. Very lengthy title. This is not going to be a lengthy and boring presentation, hopefully, but yeah, very excited to speak about this topic. Before I dive into the topic, I just want to introduce myself a bit more. As mentioned, my name is Esben Friis-Jensen. I'm the co-founder and chief growth officer at a company called Userflow. And Userflow is exactly a software as a service company. So basically a company that delivers B2B software online. What we do is we sell onboarding software that other software providers can put on top of their software to better onboard their customers. We've been doing that for 3 years now. We are just 3 people, so we are still a very small team, but we've been able to bootstrap, so grow without raising money to a 7-figure annual recurring revenue. So it's doing pretty good. Prior to Userflow, I co-founded another company called Cobalt, which is a cybersecurity company, also a software as a service company. So again, a software company, this company was doing penetration testing, so security testing to software providers, but delivered via a software platform. I'm Danish, but I'm based in the US and have been here for the last 9 years. I'm normally based in San Francisco, but today I'm actually in Los Angeles. But yeah, so originally from Denmark. So let's dive into the topic here. Before I dive into it, I want to just make sure that everybody understand what a SaaS business is really, and what it is in relation to B2B and so on, and what that means. So, but before I do that, I just want to share a bit on why I actually decided to do a startup in the first place, because doing a SaaS B2B startup is of course a very specific thing, but why should one do a startup in general? And for me, number one is really that it's super fun. So I've been doing now startups for the last 9 years, and it's been incredibly fun to build a company and do something that brings value to many people around the world. And that relates a lot to the second part, which is when you build a startup, you get to solve a problem for many instead of few. Typically, when you join like a normal company, you get to optimize certain processes, and it's harder to see how you fit in the bigger picture and solving the problem for many people or companies. But when you're building a startup, you really get to feel how you are selling directly either to consumers or businesses, and seeing that you're making an impact for many people instead of just a few people. And then last but not least, you get to learn faster than ever. Building a startup is really like doing a MBA on steroids. You have to learn how to incorporate a business, build a product, get product market fit, do sales, do marketing, do customer success, etc., etc. And you get to learn all that in a very steep learning curve, but that's also what it makes it a lot of fun. And you get to do that for your own business. So these are the 3 key reasons why I decided to do a startup and why I continue to find startups super exciting. To then dive further into why I'm focused on B2B SaaS, I just want to quickly, as mentioned, explain what B2B SaaS actually means. To do that, I have this slide here. So B2B, for those who don't know, basically means business to business. So it means you as a business is selling to businesses, not to consumers. And software is, of course, any type of software that businesses might use that you want to create for them. In the 80s and 90s, software was sold on-prem, which basically means that it was sold as something you would install on your own servers somewhere, and you would typically sell it to IT leadership. But then in the 2000s, this new thing came around, which is basically the software as a service industry, which basically means you are selling software online to businesses. So on the internet, you are basically selling the software, typically on a subscription model. And you're also selling it more directly to business executives, so sales management or whoever the business executive might be, instead of the IT leadership. IT leadership, of course, still has an impact on the decision, but you're more selling to business leadership. And today, software as a service has reached a very mature state. And today it's actually possible for anyone out there as a new startup to build a software as a service business, because it's become super easy to build a product online. It's become very cheap to buy a server online to have your product online. And these things help on you being able to start startups that are basically SaaS businesses. So that's another great reason for wanting to do this. If you look at why I think somebody should, when you do a startup, should do a software as a service B2B startup, it's really two things. One is that the market potential is huge. You have the entire business space. A lot of them are still using, if not pen and paper, then more kind of old school spreadsheets to do a lot of their processes. And it has a lot of inefficiencies, and I'm pretty sure if any of you out there have worked in a company, you have seen a lot of inefficiencies happening. And those inefficiencies are what you can solve with a software product that you can sell to these businesses so they can make their processes smarter and do things faster, better, etc. So that's a big reason why I think somebody should do a B2B software as a service company. The second reason is, especially as you're an early stage company or startup, is that businesses have money. So that means you can pretty early on generate a revenue by selling to businesses, because they are, if you build a product that's valuable enough for them, they're gonna pay for that. This is harder to do when you're selling to consumers, unless you're like an e-commerce business, but still that requires quite a bit of scale. But in many consumer businesses, it takes a lot longer to generate an actual revenue. And that makes it harder for an early stage startup to keep going, especially without raising money. So that's another big reason for doing a B2B software as a service company. There are businesses out there that are ready to spend money on this kind of software. So it's just about finding a problem that you can solve for them. There's a famous venture capitalist called Mark Andreessen, here pictured on my slide, that famously said, software is eating the world, which basically means that all these inefficient processes needs to be replaced by great software that can solve the problems. And we're still not, even today, at a state where software have eaten the world completely. So there's still plenty of business opportunities for new startups to join this market and build something fantastic to help businesses solve problems. So yeah, so that was a bit on why I think somebody should do a B2B software as a service startup. Then that was a bit about the why, but then how do you actually go about it? Well, first of all, you need to find a team. Of course, you can start a startup on your own. That's all fine, and some people make that work. But I definitely think it's a lot easier to do a startup if you find a team, and ideally find a team where you can complement each other on different skill sets. So for instance, in Userflow, I'm the one doing most of the sales, marketing and stuff. And my co-founder, Sebastian, he's doing the technical side of things. So he's the one developing the product, programming, coding, and so on. A team of two like that is great. But in Cobalt, we were also a team of 4, which can also work. I think 4 is probably the max I would suggest as a co-founding team. But yeah, really think about finding a good team. It's going to make the journey a lot more fun to do it with somebody else than just yourself. Then the second thing is, of course, to find a problem that you can solve for these businesses. The way I suggest you go about that is that maybe you already work in a business and you're seeing inefficiencies, as I mentioned, and maybe you already thought about how you could solve these inefficiencies. You should use that knowledge that you have if you already work in a company to go out and figure out if this is a problem that could be solved smarter with some software. What I did and have done with both Userflow and Cobalt prior to that is to always keep a list of ideas or problems that I wanted to fix. So then the day I decide to do a startup, I can take out that list and kind of, okay, I have all these great ideas from the past, which one would be great to do? So that's something I highly recommend. Keep a list, keep a record of some sort so you keep it in mind and can go back to that list and evaluate your ideas. When you've then kind of decided, okay, this is the idea I want to go with, this is a real problem I think exists, and I can build a software solution to solve this problem for businesses, then you need to go and validate that with some potential customers. So you basically go and ask them, is this a problem for you? Is it a real problem? And then I ideally want them to go something like this guy, where they're saying like, fix it, fix it, fix it. This is a big problem for us, and we are ready to buy this product if you build it. That's the best feedback you can get in the beginning, but really to truly validate a software product, you need to build what's called a MVP or minimum viable product, which is basically it's a small software product. It's not the full software product that you intend on building with all the bells and whistles. It's just like the basic software product that solves the problem for the customer. With both Cobalt and Userflow, we build an MVP such as that, where we have all the baseline functionality of solving a key problem available, but nothing more. And with that minimum viable product, you go out and try to sell it to customers. And it's super important in the business to business world to actually get somebody to pay, because if they're just saying, yeah, this is a great product, maybe I want to use it, that's not enough. You really have to truly validate your software and idea. You have to get somebody to pay for your software. That shows it's a real problem for them and something they want to buy. This is actually an iterative process, so you shouldn't give up just because you cannot sell it in the beginning, but then you can iterate on your software or problem to finally find what's famously called the product market fit. And this can take many years to fully find it, but at least get some initial product market fit is by having somebody buy it is great. In Cobalt, we had somebody buy our software after we had worked on it for 3 months. And in Userflow, it was a similar process. So get somebody to build an MVP and get somebody to buy it. Then now you build an MVP, you got somebody to buy it. Maybe now you're thinking about, should I bootstrap or fundraise? And in both Cobalt and Userflow, I've tried 2 different paths. In Cobalt, we were fundraising, which basically means we raised outside capital money from investors. So we went out and got investment money to grow our business. And that was a fun journey, and we grew fast from there, and a lot of fun. In Userflow, we've decided to fully bootstrap, which means we are not taking any outside money, and we are doing it all by ourselves. So we are self-funded, basically. There are pros and cons to each approach. I've tried to list some of them here. So let's just go here to the next slide. I hope you can see this. But I would say some of the pros to bootstrapping is that you can more decide your own path. You're less dependent on external stakeholders. So for instance, now with Userflow, we have a very small team and we don't intend on like increasing that team significantly. And we can decide on that path. We're not like pushed to hire more people or similar. But some of the cons to bootstrapping is you will have a lower salary in the beginning because you haven't raised any capital, and you might have a harder time to actually go and hire somebody because you maybe don't have the money, or the trust due to not having like outside capital. So there are also some cons to being bootstrapped, but it's a lot of fun. And especially when you're successfully bootstrapping, as we have done at Userflow, it becomes a lot of fun because then you can fully decide your own path. If you look at fundraising, you of course get a higher salary earlier and it becomes easier to hire, but it's also very much a go big or go home kind of world. Investors expect a high return and that's what they're going to push you for. So you need to go out and hire and grow the business very fast to go big, ideally go public in the long run or nothing. So you can less so decide your own path when you go down the investment route. And of course, you will have more external stakeholders to manage. So yeah, so that was a bit on some things you can think about in relation to your business. But let's say you, for instance, decided to bootstrap your business, similar to what we did at Userflow, and you only have a small team, like 2 or 3 people. What do you then do? Well, there's this new go-to-market strategy out there, and it's called, it's something I'm a big fan of. It's actually always been around, but now it's kind of been branded as a go-to-market strategy, and it's called product-led growth. What product-led growth is it's a strategy that allows you to, with very few resources in your team, so people-wise, to actually grow your business. It's because you're relying on your software product to do the most of the selling, heavyweight or heavy lifting for you. And the alternative to product-led is sales-led, where you have more of a people-driven process to sell to customers. So you do sales meetings, you do customer success calls and so on. But in a product-led world, you are more relying on the product to do the heavy lifting for your selling and retention and so on. An easy way to look at that is really this graph here. So a typical product-led approach to selling is that you have customers attracted to your website. So you have some kind of public-facing website. Maybe you are attracting them with ads or something else. And then when they go to your website, they learn about your product. They can sign up for a free trial or freemium of your product, so they can actually try the product themselves and try to see how it works. And then they can experience the value on their own. And then they can buy, ideally with also buying on their own. The power of this model is that it doesn't involve people so much. It's all the product selling itself, basically. Of course, you can add people to the process to empower it a bit, but the product is doing the heavy lifting in this kind of sales process. And that allows you to basically sell and grow with less people in your team. Then Forrester, actually, just to validate a bit more, Forrester came out with a report that says that nearly 75% of all business buyers, they say they prefer buying from a website, self-service, online. So this just proves the point that it's not just a strategy that allows you to be more effective selling with your product. It's actually also the go-to-market strategy that your buyers prefer. They actually prefer to go to a website and try the product themselves and buy it themselves without having to necessarily speak with anyone. So this is a great strategy for early stage startups to follow, because it both requires less resources from salespeople and so on, and it is aligned with what your buyers actually want. There's a lot of companies who have had success with this model. Some of them are listed here. Probably all of you or most of you are familiar with Zoom, which is the tool we're using right here. Zoom have had an amazing product-led growth strategy where they allowed consumers to use their product for free. So people would go out and use Zoom for free, and you could try it and see how great a communication tool it is. And then the people who were using it would, of course, recommend it to their companies to buy. And then Zoom would earn money when a company was buying their product. So that's kind of the freemium or free trial approach to selling your product, as you allow people to try it for free or as a freemium. And then that drives a better or bigger business deal in the long run. Yeah, there are numerous examples of successful businesses who are following this strategy, and that's why I highly recommend going out and doing that. The other great thing about product-led growth is there's a ton of tools out there you can use to support your product-led growth process. It's very important as a startup not to try to build everything yourself. You should build your core product, and then everything else you should ideally have other tools help you with. And a lot of these tools are not that expensive, so you can get started with them early. A great tool for payments, for instance, is Stripe, where you can then, without having to build your own payment system, you can use Stripe as a payment system, or Xero you can use to authenticate users, so have as a sign up and login tool, etc., etc. And Userflow you can use for onboarding inside your product. So there are tons of great tools that you should definitely look into if you're building a SaaS B2B startup and wanna improve your product-led growth approach. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Now I'm gonna open up for any questions if there are any. But yeah, thanks for having me. I hope to see a lot of you build some great SaaS B2B companies. The market, as I said, is huge, and there's still a lot of opportunity out there. So yeah, highly encourage anyone who has a great idea of a problem to solve to go out and try it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Esben. This is a very useful presentation because there's so much being said about SaaS these days. It's wonderful to realize that there's still opportunities. You know, you hear about Salesforce all the time, and the impression that many people have is that, right, it's the space is already taken. But yeah, do you see still a lot of opportunity in the market?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's so many inefficient processes in businesses today. And also, like, many of them were maybe solved with software in the past, but that software is maybe now 20 years old or 10 years old, right? And there will always be room for new software companies coming in and outcompeting the more older software companies. I would love to see somebody to take on Salesforce, for instance, as a CRM. But yeah, there are many examples of that. But so I think there's a good mix of markets where you can go in and replace maybe some software that already exists, or other markets that are just like completely without software, where they're using pen and paper spreadsheets, and you can deliver some software that's more fit for purpose.
Yeah. Now there is a question here from Lucy. From Kenya. What is the best tool for generating invoices?
Great question. So it depends a bit on your process. As I said, something like Stripe, if you allow customers to self-serve and just insert credit cards, you don't really need invoices, and you can actually generate invoices from Stripe as well. So I highly recommend any product-led business or software business to look into Stripe. It's a great tool for handling payments. There are also tools like QuickBooks from Intuit that can do invoices and so on. So there are many tools out there that can handle this kind of stuff.
Right, right. Another question now. How did you do competitor analysis?
I think you should always be aware about your competitors, and you should look at the market before you go into it. So you know it's what you're going into. I would say with Cobalt, what we did there, we went into a market where the incumbents were consultant companies, right? So they were not software companies. So what we were coming with was very new, and it was a software-driven model. So in that market, yes, we looked at the consultancies and said, okay, maybe there are some things we need to do which is aligned with them, but we were also bringing in a completely new model. So we didn't care too much about it because we could go and say we are much more smarter, more effective, more lean, cheaper, faster. With Userflow, we entered a market where it's actually a market with 20 other software providers. So it's not like it's a highly competitive market. And in that market, you of course do more like analysis of what features do the customers have. You can typically go to like pricing pages, or you can look at G2, which is a site where you can look at reviews for different products. But in general, I would say don't care too much about your competitors. Look at how you would solve your problem and make sure you deliver your the best product possible with a great UX that solves a real problem, then even though it's a competitive space, you can still win.
Yeah, I guess you have to be really on top of the systems and the you know, the whole things to make it work.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. Okay, don't see other questions, so I think we've come pretty much to the end. And Esben, I want to thank you very much for this. This is an area where so much, I'm sure, will happen.
Yeah.
And we look forward to seeing you again soon. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.